I never expected that being the youngest sibling would mean playing live-in nanny. At 26, working remotely was a blessing that gave me freedom, or at least, it should have. My older brother Jason, 34, and his wife Lily seemed to have decided that my home office was their personal childcare center. Their kids, Ethan, 5, and Mia, 8, were adorable in theory. In practice, they were pint-sized hurricanes with a penchant for destruction. Jason worked a high-pressure job as a structural mover, clocking long hours in an office. Lily, a nurse, had erratic shifts that left them constantly in need of a babysitter. That's where I came in, not that I volunteered. They acted like my work-from-home setup meant I was lounging around in pajamas with nothing better to do than play babysitter. And maybe I could have gritted my teeth through the occasional favor, but they never asked. It was just assumed. My childhood prepared me, in the worst way, for this dynamic. Back in college, I lived at my parents' house while studying. Jason and Lily lived there too when they had their first child, Mia. That's when the babysitting duties began. My mom, exhausted after her own long days, leaned heavily on me. She'd say, "You're home anyway. Can't you help out for a bit?" A bit turned into entire days. I was expected to bathe them, feed them, and put them to sleep, even when she was home. Dad objected, but Mom always overruled him. "You're free after class. It's the least you can do," she'd insist. It wasn't like I had any choice. What could I say? No? Not unless I wanted to be labeled as ungrateful. Those early babysitting days were a mess, but I thought it was temporary. I was wrong. Jason and Lily's kids, Mia and later Ethan, were adorable, but absolutely wild. Mia was a tornado of energy, running around the house, throwing toys, and screaming if something didn't go her way. Ethan, a toddler at the time, followed her lead. Any attempt to corral them was met with defiance or outright chaos. I had no clue how to handle kids. I wasn't exactly maternal, and I was barely out of my teenage years. But every protest I made was brushed aside with the same excuse. "You're already here. What else are you doing?" My grades began slipping because I was too exhausted to finish my assignments after spending hours cleaning up after their tantrums. One day it all hit a breaking point. I had a massive paper due the next morning, and I begged Mia and Ethan to give me just 1 hour of peace. I even set them up with snacks and their favorite cartoon. It seemed to work, until it didn't. Ethan, in a fit of hyperactivity, started tossing things around the room. Pillows, books, even the TV remote were flying across the living room. Mia thought it was hilarious and encouraged him, laughing as he hurled objects. I tried to stay calm, gently taking things out of Ethan's hands and explaining that we don't throw things. But he didn't care. He just laughed and grabbed something else. Then, out of nowhere, he chucked his water-filled sippy cup directly at my laptop. Water splashed everywhere, and my laptop screen went dark. My heart sank. That was it. The last straw. I was so angry I could feel tears welling up, but I refused to cry in front of them. "Ethan, time out. Now," I said firmly. I picked him up, put him on a chair facing the wall, and told him to stay put. He cried, but I didn't care. I couldn't let him think this was okay. Mia stopped laughing immediately, clearly worried that she'd be next. When Jason got home and found out I'd put Ethan in timeout, he lost it. He was furious that I dared to punish his child. "You're not their parent," he shouted. "You don't get to discipline them," I snapped. "Then maybe you should start doing it, Jason. I'm barely keeping up with my schoolwork because of your kids, and now my laptop is ruined. Are you going to pay for it?" His response? "Kids will be kids. You should have known better than to use your laptop around them." I couldn't believe it. He was blaming me for what his kids had done. I told him I was done babysitting unless he paid me, and he called me selfish. Selfish. After everything I'd done to help him and Lily. I stood my ground, though. I refused to back down. That night, Mom barged into my room, demanding I apologize to Jason. "We're family," she said. "You should help out without expecting anything in return." Dad stepped in and defended me for once, pointing out that babysitting wasn't a small favor. It was a full-time job, and I deserved to be paid. That argument didn't sit well with Mom, but Jason and Lily eventually agreed to pay me $80 a day. reluctantly. They also covered the cost of repairing my laptop. From then on, babysitting became a paid gig, and I made sure to enforce my boundaries. When I finally moved out after college, I thought I was free. But I should have known Jason wasn't done with me yet. Fast forward a few years, and I thought I'd left those babysitting nightmares behind. I had my own place, a solid job, and for the first time, real independence. Life was finally starting to feel like my own. But Jason, he wasn't about to let me off the hook that easily. I landed a remote job that let me work from home. It was perfect. Great pay, flexible hours, and no soul-sucking commute. When Jason and Lily found out, though, they zeroed in on the home part. Apparently, working from home meant I wasn't really working. It started small, Jason calling to ask if I could watch the kids for an hour while Lily ran errands. 1 hour turned into a full day, and suddenly, it was like I had an unspoken open-door policy for Ethan and Mia. At first, I didn't mind too much. I figured they were just going through a rough patch, and I could handle watching the kids here and there. I wasn't asking for payment anymore because I thought it'd be occasional. But Jason being Jason, he pushed it. Instead of asking, he started dropping the kids off without even warning me. I'd hear a knock at the door, open it to find Ethan and Mia standing there with their backpacks, and Jason already speeding off in his car. One morning, I tried confronting Lily about it. I thought maybe she'd understand where I was coming from. Jason's been leaving the kids here a lot lately, and it's starting to interfere with my work, I said carefully, not wanting to cause drama. Her response? Well, you're working from home, right? It's not like you're going anywhere. Jason's just so busy with his promotion, and I'm swamped at work. You know how hard it is for us. I gritted my teeth. I get that you're busy, but I'm busy too. I have deadlines, meetings. This isn't just free time at home. She sighed like I was being unreasonable. We're family, though. Can't you just help us out for a little while longer? A little while longer turned into a regular occurrence. It got to the point where I'd wake up dreading the sound of my doorbell. If I didn't answer right away, Jason would call, acting all innocent. Hey sis, just left the kids with you for the day. Hope that's cool. Thanks, you're the best. Click. One day, I decided I'd had enough. The next time Jason dropped the kids off and called to let me know, I told him flat out that I wasn't home. You left your kids on my doorstep unattended. Do you want me to call CPS or the police? I wasn't serious about calling them, but I needed to scare him enough to take me seriously. The panic in his voice was immediate. What? Where are you? You can't just leave them there. Oh, I can't? That's funny because you didn't think twice about dumping them here without asking. Come get your kids, or I'm making the call. He showed up 15 minutes later, fuming, but I didn't care. I stood my ground. After that, Mom called, predictably blaming me for being dramatic and saying I should have just taken the kids in. You're their aunt. They're family. How could you do this to Jason? I snapped. If you're so worried about it, why don't you take them in? You're retired and home all day. That shut her up real quick. From then on, I made a new rule. If Jason wanted me to babysit, he'd have to pay me up front, and I wasn't cheap. I told him $100 a month, minimum. After some arguing and guilt trips, Lily agreed to pay. It wasn't ideal, but at least I was being compensated. It felt like a win, even if Jason still tried to push boundaries every chance he got. Things seemed to settle down once Jason and Lily started paying me to babysit. It wasn't perfect, but at least I wasn't being treated like a free on-call nanny anymore. For months, I kept a strict boundary. I only agreed to babysit when it fit my schedule. If Jason didn't like it, too bad. And honestly, life was pretty good. Then came the holidays. I'd been looking forward to my first real international vacation, a week-long trip to Mexico with my boyfriend and some friends. It was going to be a dream come true, and I made it clear to Jason well in advance that I wouldn't be available during that time. Apparently, he didn't take me seriously. A week before my trip, Jason called to ask if I could babysit the kids while he and Lily went on a getaway with their friends. Sorry, I've got plans, I told him. You'll have to figure something else out. He wasn't happy. Come on, you're young. You can go on a trip anytime. Mom and Dad can't keep up with the kids, and we really need this break. I wasn't budging. Jason, this is my first international trip. I've been saving for months, and I'm not canceling it. You and Lily will have to figure something else out. He tried everything to guilt me into changing my mind. You don't even have kids, so you can't possibly understand how much we need this. It's just one favor, and we're family. You're being so selfish. I hung up. I wasn't about to let him ruin my plans, and I thought that was the end of it. But Jason, being Jason, had other ideas. 3 days into my vacation, I woke up to a string of missed calls and panicked messages from him. When I finally called back, he sounded frantic. "It's Mia," he said, his voice shaky. "She's not breathing right, and we had to take her to the hospital. It's bad, and I think you should come home." Mia has asthma, so my heart immediately sank. I felt a wave of guilt and panic. "What happened? Is she okay?" I asked, already on edge. "She's stable for now," he said vaguely. "But I really think you should be here for her. It's a family emergency." My boyfriend could see the worry on my face and offered to help me cut our trip short. I didn't want to ruin the vacation for everyone else, so I booked an earlier flight home on my own. The entire journey back, my stomach was in knots, imagining the worst. When I landed, Jason was waiting for me at the airport. Except he didn't look like a man whose daughter was in the hospital. He looked sheepish, nervous. Something was off. "What's going on?" "Take me to the hospital," I demanded. That's when he dropped the bomb. There was no emergency. Mia was perfectly fine. Jason had lied to get me back because he and Lily still wanted to go on their trip. I stared at him, completely stunned. "You're kidding, right?" I said, my voice rising. He fumbled for an excuse. "I knew you wouldn't come back if I told you the truth. We really need this break, and I didn't know what else to do." I was furious. My worry for Mia, the guilt, the expense of rearranging my trip, all of it hit me at once. "You lied about your own kid's health to manipulate me. Do you have any idea how disgusting that is?" I snapped. Jason stammered something about how they'd left money for me on the nightstand and how it wasn't a big deal. But it was a big deal. I felt used and disrespected. When we got to his house, Lily was standing outside with their luggage. She hugged me awkwardly and muttered a half-hearted apology before they both bolted for their car to pick up their friends. They didn't even wait for me to say anything. They were that desperate to leave. I stood there, seething, as their car disappeared down the street. Inside, the kids were still asleep. And I realized I wasn't just angry, I was done. Done being their doormat, done letting them take advantage of me. This time, Jason and Lily had gone too far, and I was going to make sure they never did it again. By the time I walked into Jason's house, I'd made up my mind. I wasn't going to let this slide. If Jason and Lily thought they could manipulate me and leave me with their kids while they jetted off on vacation, they were in for a rude awakening. I wasn't about to abandon Ethan and Mia, but I was done bending over backward to make things perfect. If they wanted a babysitter, they were going to get exactly what they deserved, a free-spirited aunt who didn't care about rules. When the kids woke up, I greeted them with the most cheerful smile I could muster. "Guess what, guys? For the next 3 days you can do whatever you want," I announced. Mia's eyes went wide. "Wait, really? Like anything?" she asked, clearly skeptical. "Yup, anything. Want to eat ice cream for breakfast? Go for it. Want to turn the living room into a pillow fort? Be my guest," Ethan gasped. "Can I play soccer in the house?" I laughed. "Sure, but just don't break any windows, okay?" Their excitement was instant and contagious. Mia ran to grab her mom's expensive makeup, the same makeup Lily always forbade her to touch, and started painting her face like she was preparing for a Broadway show. Ethan grabbed his soccer ball and started dribbling it through the living room. It was complete chaos, and honestly, I loved every second of it. We baked cookies that turned out more like charred hockey pucks. Mia gave me a makeover with blue eyeshadow and glitter lipstick. Ethan decided he was a professional stuntman and built a tower of cushions to jump off of. I didn't stop them from doing anything harmless. For once, I let the kids be as wild as they wanted, and they had the time of their lives. Meanwhile, I documented everything, every mess. Every masterpiece. Every wild moment. My phone was full of pictures and videos by the end of the first day. I knew Jason and Lily were going to regret leaving me in charge, and I wanted to make sure I had proof of just how fun our time together had been. My parents called me that evening, completely unaware of Jason's lies. When I told them what had happened, Dad was livid. "That boy has no shame," he said. "You teach him a lesson and don't feel bad about it." Mom, of course, had the opposite reaction. "This isn't right. You're taking it too far." "What about the kids?" "Relax, Mom," I told her. "The kids are fine. They're just expressing themselves." She tried to argue, but Dad shut her down. "Let her handle it. Jason deserves whatever he gets." For 3 days, I let the chaos unfold. Ethan turned the living room into his personal soccer stadium, and Mia decided her mom's closet was her new dress-up chest. The house was a disaster, but the kids were ecstatic. They kept thanking me for letting them have so much fun, which made it hard to stay mad at them. They were just kids after all, and this wasn't their fault. By the time Jason and Lily came back, I was ready. The house looked like a hurricane had blown through it. Pillows and blankets were everywhere, sticky cookie dough was smeared on the counters, and Mia had glitter on every inch of her face. When they walked through the door, their jaws dropped. "What the hell happened here?" Jason demanded, his voice rising. "Oh, just a little fun," I said casually, leaning against the couch. The kids had a blast. Lily's eyes darted around the room, landing on her ruined makeup and the pile of laundry Ethan had somehow managed to dump all over the floor. "You let them do this?" she screeched. "Of course. You wanted me to watch the kids, not the house, right?" I shot back. "They're fine. Isn't that what matters?" Jason's face turned red. "This is unbelievable. We trusted you," I laughed, unable to hold back. "Oh, please. Trust goes both ways, Jason. You lied to me and manipulated me into cutting my trip short so you could go on vacation. Consider this your lesson." They both started yelling, but I cut them off. "By the way, I'm keeping the $150 you left on the nightstand. Call it my fee for putting up with your kids for 3 days. If you don't like it, maybe next time, don't trick me into babysitting." Their outrage was almost satisfying. They called me selfish, irresponsible, and dramatic. But I didn't care. They needed to see what it felt like to be taken advantage of, and I wasn't about to apologize for standing up for myself. After Jason and Lily finished shouting, I gathered my things and left without another word. I didn't owe them an explanation, and honestly, I was done wasting energy on them. As I walked out, I could hear them arguing with each other over the state of their house. Part of me wanted to feel guilty, but I didn't. They'd earned every bit of the chaos I left behind. Later that evening, my phone started buzzing with calls and messages. Unsurprisingly, it was Jason. He left voicemail after voicemail, alternating between blaming me for the mess and begging me to come back and clean it up. Lily chimed in too, demanding that I return the $150 they'd left for me. I ignored them all. Then Mom called. "You need to fix this," she started, her voice sharp. "What you did was childish and unnecessary. Apologize to your brother and his wife and return the money." I let her finish before responding calmly. "Mom, I did exactly what Jason and Lily asked. I watched their kids. I didn't endanger them. I didn't neglect them. And I certainly didn't deserve to be manipulated into cutting my trip short. If Jason wanted things done differently, he shouldn't have lied to me." "But family," she began, her usual go-to argument. "Family doesn't treat each other like this," I interrupted. "I've bent over backward for Jason for years, and it's never enough. If you're so worried about it, maybe you should start babysitting his kids." That shut her up. I ended the call, determined not to let her guilt trip me into backing down. A few days later, Lily surprised me by reaching out. This time she wasn't yelling. Her tone was soft, almost apologetic. "I wanted to say I'm sorry," she began. "What Jason did, what we did, was wrong. I shouldn't have let him lie to you like that." I was caught off guard. It was the first time she'd admitted any fault. "You're right," I said simply. "You shouldn't have." She hesitated before continuing. I know you're upset and I get it. I just hope this doesn't ruin your relationship with the kids. They love spending time with you. I sighed. Look, I love Mia and Ethan, but I'm not a babysitter anymore. If you or Jason ever need help in the future, it needs to be on my terms. No more manipulation, no more guilt trips. And for the record, this was the last time I'll ever cut a trip short for either of you. She didn't argue. I understand, she said quietly, before hanging up. Jason, on the other hand, wasn't nearly as graceful. He sent me a half-hearted text apology that read more like an excuse. Something along the lines of, "Sorry if I upset you. I just didn't know what else to do." I didn't respond. Dad later told me he'd had a serious talk with Jason about respecting boundaries, but I wasn't holding my breath for any lasting change. A few weeks later, my boyfriend surprised me with a road trip to the countryside. It was his way of making up for the Mexico trip I had to cut short. The scenic views, fresh air, and peaceful atmosphere were exactly what I needed. We spent our days exploring little towns, trying local food, and laughing over the absurdity of my family drama. For the first time in weeks, I felt free of the weight Jason had dumped on me. Since then, I've stuck to my boundaries. Jason and Lily know better than to show up at my door unannounced or try to dump their kids on me without warning. If they ever need a babysitter, they pay up front, and only if it fits my schedule. It's been months now, and things have finally settled down. Mia and Ethan still adore me, and I've made sure they know I love them too. But as for Jason and Lily, our relationship is strictly polite, nothing more. I've learned the hard way that family doesn't give anyone the right to take advantage of you. Boundaries aren't selfish, they're necessary. I don't regret teaching Jason and Lily a lesson, and I certainly don't regret standing up for myself. If anything, I'm proud of how far I've come. For the first time in years, I'm putting myself first, and it feels incredible. Story 2. My brother-in-law insisted that I be his housemaid after my divorce, so I complied and utilized the opportunity to give him a lesson he will never forget. I am a 30-year-old woman who has been married to my husband for 6 years. We have 2 amazing children, Susie, who is 4 years old, and Paxton, who is 6 years old. As a stay-at-home mother, I must admit that I like watching our children grow up and taking care of them all day. On the weekends, my husband Rob puts roughly 40 hours a week in a difficult job. He spends much of his time with his pals or relaxing in his gaming area, which he refers to as his man cave. Taking care of my 2 small children, including laundry, cooking, cleaning, and taking them off and getting them up from school, may be exhausting. I ask Rob to babysit the kids for a few hours when things become too much, but he usually makes an excuse like he's had a rough week and needs some time to unwind. I've made many suggestions to hire a babysitter so I can unwind or have a ladies' night with my sister, but he says it's a waste of money. For background, I always knew Rob was seeking a conventional bride because we dated for around 3 years before we were married. He asked me to quit my work once I became pregnant with our first kid, so I wasn't surprised. Although I was fine with this choice, I had hoped he might occasionally help out around the house. However, that never occurs. Coming to the subject at hand, Rob has a 35-year-old brother named Jack. After 4 years of marriage, Jack and Sarah had 3 children. To exact revenge, she found him red-handed with a co-worker he had been skulking around with for a full year. Sarah went ahead and told their supervisor everything, including a copy of their emails and texts. Since their employer fired them both right away, and their workplace had stringent policies prohibiting co-workers dating, it was definitely a mess. As a result of this, Jack and Sarah had a huge argument during which Sarah wanted a divorce. When Sarah threatened to keep their children away from Jack, he was forced to eventually consent to the divorce. Jack asked Rob if he could move in with us instead of his parents once the divorce was finalized, since he didn't want to live with them. Rob agreed without even talking to me. To put it mildly, I was furious when I learned about it. However, Rob informed me that it was just temporary, so I chose to keep my mouth shut in order to maintain harmony in the family. 4 months have passed since Jack came in, and he's still here. If he weren't also the messiest guy I've ever met, I wouldn't mind it at all. Worse than my spouse even. With him around, It's like being in a never-ending tornado of chaos. The man simply isn't able to manage his belongings. He seems to dislike cleaning up after himself, wouldn't you think so? Soiled underwear and socks. Yes, the floor has just become their new home. He uses these dishes. It's a habit of theirs to never return to the dishwasher, or simply, where he left them too, as well as laundry. Ignore it. He doesn't even consider that. He also declines to wash his clothing. I have to admit that caring for a new family member in our home during the past few months has been somewhat difficult. It has been a daily struggle to keep our house somewhat organized while he is here. However, I make every effort to avoid upsetting anyone because we are family. My husband and I have had several in-depth conversations on this matter, and each time I was informed that his brother was experiencing difficulties, he would respond that Jack had lost both his job and his house and was simply attempting to regain his footing. I tried to be as understanding as I could, and occasionally felt sympathy. Rob and Jack had gone out for their regular men night on the weekend, at least until this week. I put the kids to bed, cleaned the house, and went to bed because they frequently arrive home extremely late. The whole home smelled like beer when I woke up the next day. A beer bottle was strewn around as I went outside. I was aware that I needed to tidy up immediately to prevent it from getting into our children's hands. I was worn out after vacuuming and scrubbing for a few hours, so I went to see how Jack and my spouse were doing. I realized that Jack had taken someone home from the pub when I saw him sleeping with a lady. To put it mildly, it was a shock. Given that we had 2 little children sleeping in the adjacent room, I found it unbelievable that he brought a total stranger into the house. Although I acknowledge that everyone experiences hardships, this was a completely new degree of rudeness. While Jack was treating our house like his own bachelor pad, I was attempting to take care of my family and keep it tidy. I knew I couldn't handle this any longer, since I had reached my breaking point. I was so angry that I quickly woke up my spouse to discuss the matter with him. He simply burst out laughing and appeared to brush it off, stating that his brother needed to enjoy himself following the divorce. By this time, I was so angry that I started yelling at him, telling him to speak to his brother, or I would. I wanted Jack to leave our house right now. I explained to Rob that this was our house with kids to think about, and that a wild, party-filled environment just wasn't an option for their steady existence. I thought Rob would speak with his brother, since he seemed to understand what I was saying. However, Jack persisted in upending our house after 3 exhausting days. I realized I had to take charge for our family when it became apparent that my spouse couldn't manage this. I made the decision to send the children to my parents' house for the day so that we could talk openly. I worked hard to prepare a large lunch in the hopes that it would set the tone for our conversation. My spouse was there when we sat down to dine. I informed my brother-in-law that he needed to locate a new residence because he had been living there for a few months. I told him that although I knew this would be a tough talk, I had to have it because I was sick of caring for him. As I talked, I could see Jack's eyes fill with rage. He was obviously not happy with what I was saying because he tightened his fists and frowned his forehead. He sighed in frustration and eventually answered, "You cannot simply dismiss me in this manner. There is nowhere else for me to go." He objected. He spoke in a frustrated tone. I made an effort to maintain my composure while stating that, although I recognized that he was going through a difficult moment, the existing state of affairs was unsustainable. Finding the perfect words while maintaining composure was difficult, especially with my spouse sitting there utterly silent and useless. I described how I was completely worn out from balancing my responsibilities as a mother, raising the children, and now hosting him in our house for the previous few months. It was becoming more difficult every day, and I felt that it would be better for everyone if he moved out and carried on living a single life somewhere else. I assured him that anytime he could, he was welcome to come see us on the weekends. It appeared like Jack's annoyance had peaked. He said, "You know what?" as his cheeks flushed deeply. "If nothing else, you might be a decent sister-in-law and assist me. Otherwise, I would pay you to live with me." His remarks were like a ton of bricks to me. I looked at my spouse, who seemed just as surprised. As much as I wanted to scold Jack for attempting to call me his housemate, I had a cunning notion as soon as I turned to face him. I forced a kind grin and said, "Of course, Jack. I can be your housemaid if you're willing to pay me." I lifted a hand to hush my husband before he could say anything further. I didn't need his assistance now if he hadn't helped me earlier. Jack's face appeared to change from one of rage to one of amazement. "You know, I think it's a brilliant idea," I went on. "As long as you refrain from hosting parties and inviting outsiders into our home, I will work as your housemaid for a reasonable salary." Jack quickly concurred, and my husband's eyes became wide as he made every effort to understand what had just transpired. I kept eating while secretly thinking about how I was going to give Jack a lesson he would never forget. I fulfilled my pledge to be Jack's housemaid by taking on all of the chores over the course of the following several days. I had a strategy up my sleeve and was simply waiting, so I didn't complain. One day, while doing his clothes, I threw a red sock into his white load by accident. This was the first time I started making unintentional mistakes. It all turned up pink, as you may assume. As he screamed in annoyance at his now pink outfit, I couldn't help but smile and feel a hidden sense of joy. The little mishaps continued after that. To his dismay, I burnt supper, and I also lost his game system, which made him look everywhere. My strategy was working, and I could see Jack's annoyance rising daily with each mishap. My strategy was gradually succeeding. Jack's valuable collection of vintage toy cars was involved in the significant accident that drove him to the brink. He was out with my spouse one weekend. I unintentionally let my children play with his priceless collection. Due to their overzealous play, a number of priceless and rare toy vehicles suffered damage or lost parts. Jack was enraged when he got home and discovered the condition of his treasured collection. His face flushed, and he began to scream at me for letting the children inside his place of worship. Additionally, I couldn't help but let a little, almost demonic chuckle to pierce my facade of innocence. Jack's expression twisted in a mixture of understanding and rage as he realized that I had been fooling him all along. He had clearly now come to the conclusion that these mishaps were not accidents at all. They were in my well-thought-out scheme. My husband's face also grew serious. He was apparently upset with me for not knowing about my plan. As I remained silent, Jack's voice became raspy from shouting. As he watched with glee, he began packing his things and insulting me in every way he could. He was aware that additional mishaps involving his possessions would occur the longer he stayed. To my astonishment, my spouse gave me a furious glare. Jack moved out to live with his parents the next day, and I had a hunch he wouldn't be coming back anytime soon. Even though my husband wasn't happy with how I handled things, it was a pleasure to have some normalcy return to our family. After a long chat, my husband made it plain that he had spoken with Jack, and that they both thought what I had done was wrong. He said that after learning about what I had done from Jack, his parents had phoned, and that they all agreed that what I had done to Jack was very inappropriate. Then Rob gave me a challenging command. He threatened to have me pack up and leave our home unless I apologized to Jack for what I had done right now. I was shocked to hear that. I attempted to put some order into our life and cope with his dirty sibling, so my husband asked me to leave the house. I adamantly informed him that, regardless of the repercussions, I would not be offering an apology to his brother. Here, I did nothing wrong. Rob reiterated his demand, stressing that I must provide an apology for what he perceived as degrading his brother during a difficult period. We seemed to be at a standstill, and the strain in our talk was evident. My feelings for what he was doing to me varied from annoyance to a developing sense of unfairness. I came to see that my husband not only lacked courage, but he also showed little regard for me as his wife. He obviously didn't think what his brother did was improper, so there was no need in disputing with him. I prepared my belongings and brought the children to my parents' house that same evening. My mother knew something wasn't right when she saw me. I started crying because I was unable to contain myself any longer. It felt like a torrent of feelings that I had been holding within for a very long time. I confided in my mother, sharing my sorrows and disappointments. I felt abandoned when my husband picked his brother over me, or when I refused to continue caring for Jack, even though I had done my best to be a decent wife for so long. As I told my mother about the agony I had gone through, she listened in disbelief and promised to support my choice. She assured me that my father shared this sentiment and that they would be there for me no matter what I choose. That my parents shared my viewpoint gave me a sense of relief. despite the fact that my spouse and his family did not. I treasured the time I spent with my family and children throughout the next days. We decided to get together for the first time in a long time, as it was an opportunity to catch up with some old pals. I had a genuine sense of life. I spent a great day with my pals, laughing and telling stories. Rob would call to see how the kids were doing throughout this time, but I made an effort to speak with him in a quick and indirect manner. I wanted the time and space to go about all that had transpired and make decisions about my families and my future. I clung to the support of my loved ones, while I struggled to decide what I wanted to do next, because the break from the ongoing chaos was like a breath of fresh air. My children began to sense a difference in me as the days passed. In comparison to the years I had spent married to Rob, everyone could see how much happy I had been in a short period of time. With my newfound clarity and resolve, their naive perceptions reflected the reality I was beginning to come to terms with. I made a choice that would change my life. For the sake of my health and the happiness of my kids, it was time to leave this turbulent marriage. In order to start compiling the required paperwork, I spoke with my parents and contacted a divorce attorney. I plucked up the guts to invite Rob to lunch today. He immediately consented, probably thinking that the purpose of this meeting was to make amends or provide an apology. Even though I was anxious, I knew it was time for me to take charge of my life at last. When we sat down, Rob told me that the home had gotten rather messy while I was away and looked really happy to see me. He said he really missed having me to help him clean up after himself. He sounded so juvenile that I was shocked. He gave me an unjust ultimatum without saying a word, and he didn't appear to regret it. I gave the divorce papers to him. I made my decision to dissolve our marriage in silence. As he studied the documents, Rob appeared stunned, unable to comprehend what I had done. He started talking, perhaps to argue, but I couldn't stand to hear it any longer. A wave of resolve swept through me as I got up from my chair. I had had enough of his controlling my life and making decisions that made me feel ignored and dissatisfied. My spouse and my in-laws had been calling and leaving me messages ever since I got back home. In order to keep things from getting worse, they are asking that I apologize to my brother-in-law for my choice to dissolve the marriage. Read it, then. Am I the jerk for wanting to give my brother-in-law a lesson he will never forget, and for divorcing my spouse due to an unreasonable and domineering ultimatum? First update. In just a few days, this gained more attention than I had anticipated. However, I appreciate all of your responses. I've come to the realization that I made the proper choice after witnessing the overwhelmingly supportive response to my decision to divorce my husband. My in-laws are equally adamant in their condemnation of my choice to divorce Rob, and Rob has continued to try to persuade me to reconsider. Rob has been sending me a variety of messages, from apologies to charges that I'm not a decent wife. I thought it was hilarious that he even had the gall to accuse me of cheating. He has even threatened to take our kids away from me if I proceeded with a divorce. I'm remaining composed and doing as my lawyer has advised, which is to keep a record of everything. With his divorced brother involved, I'm sure his lazy ass won't be able to care for the kids by himself. Furthermore, my in-laws are already overburdened. In the middle of all of this, I also received a lengthy message from my brother-in-law, Jack. In order for him to speak with Rob and put things right, he insisted that I apologize to him. He said he couldn't figure out why I was getting so worked up. When I initially consented to be his housewife, I responded that I would never apologize when I had done nothing wrong because I thought his delusions were absurd. I was furious with him. I continued by saying that I was relieved that he was broke and living with his parents in his 30s. I couldn't help but laugh when I consider how furious he must have been to read my message and be unable to respond, so I blocked him after sending it. Right now, I intend to remain focused and refocus my time and efforts on my family. My children are settling in and appear to be truly happy living with my parents. Seeing my dad play with them every evening after school and take them to the park is endearing. On weekends, we have our family movie nights where we huddle together on the couch, sharing popcorn and rewatching our favorite movies. Seeing my children laugh and enjoy with their grandparents is my glimmer of hope during these tumultuous times. It's my solace knowing that they're finding happiness and support from my parents in this new chapter of their lives. I know the journey ahead remains marked with uncertainty, and I am mentally preparing myself for what's about to come. Update 2 today. Out of the blue, my husband's family, accompanied by my husband, showed up at our doorstep, and things are quite messy to say the least. My parents sat them down in our living room while we sent our children upstairs, so we could all talk freely. His parents didn't waste any time to start complaining about how I was trying to ruin their son's life. My husband remained quiet as his mother unleashed her grievances, insisting that he had provided for me and our children all his life, and now I was divorcing him for no reason. She stated that it was wrong of me to embarrass his brother Jack, instead of being a kind sister-in-law. So it wasn't a huge thing that my spouse asked me to apologize to his brother. My dad interfered at this point and asked them what was my responsibility in all of this, since it was their son who had refused to stand up for me and had presented me with an ultimatum. His parents started to shout, arguing that Rob's brother Jack was going through a terrible period. Hence, all I had to do was take care of him. They were hot in their faces as they continued to demand that I could apologize and make things right for their kid, so that they could attempt to move past this whole affair. My dad, unfazed by their ranting, questioned them if it was fair for my brother-in-law Jack to have dubbed me a housemaid. He said that just because I was married to Rob didn't imply that I had to take care of his brother as well. My dad pointed out to them that they should have taken care of their own son following his divorce, instead of anticipating that I would pick up after him. He informed them their son's failure to become a better man was the reason why his wife had divorced him. This appeared to shut them up. My parents emphasized their support for my choice to divorce my spouse, emphasizing that they were solidly by me. My spouse didn't utter a word throughout this entire episode and sat looking uncomfortable. My mother sternly urged them to leave our house. As they left, she made it plain that they were not allowed to come back unless they wanted us to call the police. I was overcome with appreciation for my parents' steadfast support. If they hadn't been there to defend me in front of his parents, I don't know what I would have done. After the event, I contacted my attorney and said I wanted to get the divorce process forward as quickly as possible. The actions and discussions that took place today have further demonstrated that there was no need in postponing the inevitable, if that is even possible. Realizing that I have spent so many years of my life in my marriage, and that it seems to have been for nothing, is a burdensome sensation. Nevertheless, I take comfort in the knowledge that I have upheld my values and stayed loyal to my convictions. One day, I hope that my decision today will serve as a good example for my kids, showing them how important it is to never let somebody treat them badly or disrespectfully under the pretense of love or family. 3 months have passed since my previous post, and I'm happy to report that the court has formally approved our separation. Our attorneys will next need to come to a consensus on issues like child custody, visitation rights, and how to divide up all of our assets. I still don't think my spouse is a horrible guy, despite the fact that many others have said that he is at fault and that I should cut him off entirely. I think his character was much influenced by his childhood and the actions of his parents. For the benefit of our kids, I believe his parents ought to have instilled in him the values of self-reliance and consideration regardless. I have no animosity against them and am determined to keep things polite. Last month, I received a surprise apology from my brother-in-law Jack. I'm not sure what exactly made him change, but it's possible that he finally saw the seriousness of what he was doing, particularly treating me like a housemaid. Since I had banned him on my phone, he sent me a long letter of apologies in which he described his depression over the consequences of his marriage and the fact that he constantly had his mother-wife pick him up after him. He had anticipated that I would follow suit. Although I was tempted to retaliate by accusing him of being the one who cheated on his wife for a full year, I decided he wasn't worth the trouble. Jack may have come out to me as a last resort since Rob subsequently disclosed that he had a heart-to-heart with his brother, implying that the pending divorce had compelled him to face the truth of what he was losing. Naturally, my in-laws have not apologized for their actions, but I've reached a point where I can honestly state that I'm happy as long as they continue to be distant in my life. Although I am well aware that they may try to disparage me to my kids, I trust the morals and values I have taught them to be able to see through their lies. For my part, I intend to return to work, I'm working on my CV and getting ready to return to the workforce, even though I realize it's been a while since I had a job. As long as I can start making my own money, I don't care if I have to start with a low-level job. On the other hand, my parents have embraced me wholeheartedly. I am aware that I cannot remain here indefinitely. In order to provide my kids with the life they deserve, I'm resolved to put in a lot of effort and become self-sufficient. Story 3. After my stepdaughter forbade me from attending her wedding, I canceled the wedding I paid for is the title of this narrative. They are now pleading for my assistance. Hello everyone. Big news before we get into today's video. I have started a new Reddit account. It's not Minecraft in the background this time. In keeping with the season, there are Subway Surfers and a Christmas motif. Take a look. Go ahead and join the fun by subscribing. The description contains links. I'll see you there. Let's begin the video now. 17 years. I spent that amount of time with Lisa. I was in my late 30s when we first met, thriving for myself following years of arduous work. I had at last reached a point where I could unwind and savor the results of my labor. After that, Lisa entered my life. A single mother with a small kid, at the age of 9, named Erica, I felt Lisa needed a vacation since she was intelligent, humorous, and charming. I had no idea that I would be giving them respite while they just took advantage of me. I had no problem stepping up when we first met. Erica required a bicycle. Completed. Lisa desired to complete her education. I paid her tuition. I saw it as a method to lend a hand rather than as a means of purchasing their devotion. I reasoned that I couldn't ignore Erica if I was going to be with Lisa. I reasoned that perhaps I could have a beneficial impact on her life. As time passed, I found myself accomplishing far more than I had originally committed to. Erica attends a private school, paid for extracurricular activities. Every few years, she gets a new laptop, and she goes on excursions with her classmates. Me alone. When Erica requested a unique prom dress from a designer that was more expensive than my first automobile, I didn't even blink. Why not? I reasoned. After all, I wanted Lisa and Erica to have the best since we were creating something together. The problem is that I never felt like I belonged with the family. Yes, Erica was courteous, but she seemed aloof. When I gave her a present, she would feign a grin and leave for her room without even saying, "Thank you." Teenagers are exactly like that. Lisa would dismiss it, but I began to get tired of it. Nevertheless, I assumed that as Erica grew older, things would improve. I was spending more than $90,000 on Erica's private school education by the time she was a college student. I agreed with Lisa when she claimed it was an investment in her future. I wanted to give Erica the chances I was never given. I even gave her a brand new Mercedes-Benz GLE as a surprise when she graduated last year. Dark, smooth, completely loaded. Erica was ecstatic and gave me her first sincere embrace in years. I briefly considered the possibility that I was finally reaching her. Now fast forward to the present. Erica and a man called Brian are engaged. He's not too bad, I suppose. Hails from a wealthy family, works in finance, and appears to truly care about her. Lisa was ecstatic about the engagement and would not stop talking about how Erica was destined for success. She kept claiming that Brian was a perfect fit for her. He's quite steady. Almost immediately, Lisa began organizing the wedding, treating it like the most important event of her life. A live string quartet, a personalized cuisine, a vineyard setting, the works. Every element exuded luxury, and the guest list was approaching 350. I was paying for it, of course. Why? Because I was able to pay for it. Additionally, I wanted Erica to have the wedding of her dreams, or so I believed. During the planning phase, little issues began to bother me. I was not invited to these planning sessions that Erica and Lisa would have. It's only for girls. When I proposed inviting some of my closest friends, Lisa would wave me away. The guest list is already quite limited, Lisa explained to me. Tight. Apparently those who had supported me for decades were not included in the 350 persons on that list. Let's discuss Greg. The epitome of a deadbeat is this man. His face would be prominently displayed if absentee fathers were inducted into a Hall of Fame. Over the course of our 17-year relationship, Greg has supported Erica more times than I can count on one hand. To be clear, I do not mean that he came through in any significant manner. When I say that he showed up, I'm referring about the type of appearances when he shows up, gives a few half-hearted remarks, and then leaves before the dishes are done. However, the way Erica perceives him to her is what bothers me. Greg is a superhero of sorts. She used to shout, "Dad's here," as she ran to the door when she was younger, as though he were Santa Claus. I, on the other hand, had been there each and every day to make sure she had everything she required. The truth is that Greg hasn't made a single contribution to her life. I'm not sure what kind of fairy tale she's telling herself. No birthday gifts, no child support, not a bad card at all. Lisa once told me that Greg had a difficult time following the divorce. It seems like the poor guy needed time to think things over. Room. He didn't require room. He required a clue and a job. However, Lisa never pushed him because she was Lisa. She pretended that it was her part-time job and made excuses for him. He remains her father. As if that allowed him to do nothing at all, she would say, "The way Greg seems is what truly irritates me, only enough to keep Erica responsible. He isn't entirely out of the question. That would make too much sense, I see. Rather, he comes in a few times a year, just enough to maintain the cool dad persona." After taking Erica to a mid-range chain restaurant for supper and giving her some ambiguous life advice, he would vanish for several months. Additionally, Erica always returns with a smile, as if she had just spent a weekend with Oprah. Not to mention Lisa's involvement in all of this. Greg has always been seated at the table thanks to her, both physically and figuratively. He once called to express his desire to visit Erica. After a whole year of radio quiet, something occurred. Lisa virtually gave him the red carpet, mind you. In order for them to spend time together as a family, she prepared this large meal, made sure Erica was dressed, and even invited me to go out for the evening. Since I didn't want to be the villain, I played along. Even though I'll confess that one hurt, I reasoned that I wouldn't interfere if Erica needed Greg in her life. I believed that I was acting like the larger person. I was just being a sucker, looking back. The problem is that Greg makes no effort to appear engaged. He isn't assisting Erica move into her college dorm or attending her school functions. Even if he didn't help with her books, tuition, or anything else, he nevertheless managed to enter her life and be her father, while I am the one who covers everything. The lauded nanny. It's offensive. I once attempted to discuss this with Lisa. "You know, I feel like I'm doing all the work and Greg gets all the credit," I told her. "You're overthinking things," she told me, with a weary expression, as if she had heard it all before. "You are loved by Erica. Greg is just... Greg? Even so, what does that mean? Greg is just Greg. Is that meant to excuse his utter indifference?" Since arguing with Lisa over Greg is like trying to teach a fish to ride a bike, I decided to let it go. No point. And now for the nuptials. When Erica declared her engagement, I was very delighted for her. This is my opportunity to truly be a part of something unique, I thought. The wedding invitation was the worst. I opened mine to see my name when they got there. Somewhere. Anywhere. However, not at all. It was in black and white there. The bride's father is Greg Reynolds. Not a word about me. Not even a footnote reached me. I seemed to be non-existent. To be honest, I considered approaching Erica about it. But what would be the point? She would just tell me that it wasn't a big problem, or that it was an error. However, it was significant. It was quite important. I've tried to be a decent stepdad for the greater part of 20 years, but when it came to the most important things, I was entirely erased. Greg, too. He was enjoying every moment of it I saw. When Lisa brought up the father-daughter dance, I noticed that he was smiling like the cat that ate the canary. Despite my want to wipe that arrogant expression from his face, I maintained my composure. Seldom. It's not even about the money right now. The tens of thousands I've spent on Erica's life are irrelevant to me. The principle is important to me. It's unfair. It's also wrong. The night that everything changed follows. The night was a Friday. I planned this elegant meal at one of the town's most exclusive eateries. I didn't cut any corners. A special menu with items I can't even pronounce, a private dining area, and attentive care for everyone. I'm glad to be doing this for the family since I assumed it was a celebration of Erica's wedding. This supper would be the last straw, and I had no idea of it. Everyone was present: Lisa, Erica, Greg, the fiancé of Erica, Brian, as well as Brian's parents, Robert and Linda. I saw it as a gesture of kindness and support. I wanted everyone to have a sense of belonging, as if we were all gathering for Erica's special day. I continued to hold on to the foolish belief that I was a member of the family. A huge error. The evening began well. At least I believed so. The beverages were pouring. Even though I don't drink, everyone else seemed to be having fun. The environment appeared bright, and the food looked amazing. As they casually discussed the wedding arrangements and the vineyard's beauty, Brian's parents were courteous. Erica was radiant, discussing the floral arrangements and the fittings for her garment. Greg, however, was seated as though he owned the space, leaning back in his chair while wearing that arrogant expression I've come to detest. I made an effort to keep the conversation light by asking Linda and Robert about their summer trip plans, and spoke to Brian about his job and finances. Lisa was swarming over Greg as usual, making sure he had everything he needed and behaving as though he were a VIP. Since all I really wanted was for the evening to go smoothly, I dismissed it. Then Erica got to her feet. She indicated that she wished to make a toast by clinking her glass. I relaxed, anticipating some sincere remarks about thankfulness and family. "I just want to thank everyone for coming tonight," she adds instead. "I'm so grateful to have each and every one of you in my life, and this is such a great time for Brian and me." All right, a good beginning. I waited for her to make a comment about me, perhaps a reference to the man who foots the bill, but no. "I'm especially grateful to my dad," she continued, turning to face Greg. "He has been my pillar of support. And the fact that he will be escorting me down the aisle excites me much." The table burst into cheers. Greg smirked, as if he had just been given the city's keys as he leaned back. Lisa was grinning and applauding as if she had just seen a miracle, as if this were some kind of touching family moment. Even Brian's parents were nodding along. In the meantime, I sat there in startled silence, holding onto my fork so tightly that I was afraid it might break. I'm not even sure how to explain how I felt. Betrayed. Furious. Embarrassed. Most likely anything listed above. I was paying for every little element of Erica's wedding and throwing this extravagant supper, and I'm treated like this, as if I'm invisible. I got to my feet as the cheering subsided. I couldn't simply sit there and take it, but I also didn't want to cause a scene. "Well, if Greg is walking you down the aisle, then Greg can pay for the wedding," I remarked, lifting my glass. "I'm leaving." A pin may have been dropped. Erica had a lovely expression on her face. Her mouth actually fell open. Lisa appeared as though she had just seen a ghost. Midship, Brian froze, and his parents looked at each other awkwardly. Greg wasn't grinning for the first time all evening. He appeared to have had the rug pulled out from under him. I didn't wait for a reply from anyone. I put my napkin on the table, put down my drink, and left. As I walked away, I felt like everyone was watching me, but I didn't mind. I'd had enough. I sat down in the living room when I arrived home and tried to take in what had transpired. This is what happened after 17 years of going above and beyond for Lisa and Erica. I wasn't taken for granted by them. They treated me disrespectfully, while I am treated like an afterthought. Greg, who has done nothing for Erica in her whole life, gets to be the star. It enraged me. After an hour or so, Lisa returned home. I prepared myself for the expected confrontation as soon as I heard her keys jangling in the door. As expected, her cheeks flushed with rage as she ran into the living room. What on earth was that? She made a demand. I answered. That was me finally standing up for myself, as I gave her a serene look. Erica was humiliated in front of everyone by you, she fired back. The timing of your scene-making couldn't have been worse. I gave a sour laugh. As I sat there looking like a complete idiot, Erica thanked Greg for being her rock. And you allowed this to occur? Lisa gave an eye roll. Stop being so theatrical, please. Her father is Greg. She wants this. Lisa, what about what I desire? Is that important? Or am I simply the one who covers everything? For that, she had no response. Rather, She reframed the debate by accusing me of spoiling Erica's special day and turning it into a personal attack. I just gave a headshake. It was useless to argue with her. She never would, and she didn't understand. That evening, I decided something. I would no longer allow them to take advantage of me. I woke up the next morning feeling strangely at ease after that disastrous Friday night supper. Perhaps it was the serenity that accompanies insight. I wasn't dwelling on it or questioning myself. I simply understood what had to be done. Greg could get the entire package if he truly wanted to be a father. Allow him to manage the logistics, the stress, and, above all, the pocketbook. Officially, I was out. I sat down to my computer and logged into the joint account Lisa and I shared right away. I transferred all of the money I had contributed to Erica's wedding to my own account. I won't lie. It was pleasant. I went so far as to confirm that everything was safe. I wasn't going to allow Lisa to embezzle money for a wedding because she didn't have a job and hadn't for years. I had stopped financing. I then picked up my phone and began making calls. The caterer came first. I had engaged this upscale caterer. I was spending over $20,000 on food alone. I gave the management an explanation of the circumstances. Something concerning unanticipated events. I didn't want to share my personal problems with a complete stranger. They were nice about it, which surprised me. They decided to cancel without incurring any charges because the wedding was still a few months away. Complete reimbursement. A victory. There are still plenty to go. And then there was the location. The major one was this. A lovely location. Yes, but absurdly costly as well. The deposit alone, I believe, was about $10,000. The event planner sounded irritated when I called, as if I had personally wrecked her day by calling off the event. I already understood that the deposit was non-refundable, so she clarified that, all right, don't lose your $10,000. To escape this situation, it was worth losing that small amount of coin. While the venue put me on hold, I had an idea after taking a quick look at my car keys on the counter, Erica's Mercedes. After she graduated from college, I gave her the automobile, believing it was a kind way to thank her for all of her efforts. She had really just passed, and I had most likely spent more time planning her graduation celebration than she had spent studying. But whatever, I believed the automobile would make her happy, so I got it for her. But that automobile was mine now. I couldn't let her retain it since it was in my name. I immediately uploaded it on a car-selling app after all that had transpired. I had a buyer lined up in a matter of hours. The Mercedes was gone before the end of the week, and I had an additional $50,000. What do you know? It was wonderful. I phoned the photographer after the venue. Erica and Lisa insisted on hiring an award-winning photographer who not only took pictures but also documented memories, whatever that means. So this was another costly appointment. The man was very sympathetic. He even stated he was pleased to return the payment since he had a queue of couples who had been hoping to get my date. For the remainder of the day, I went through the list of providers, including the cake designer, the band, and the florist. Each phone call was a tiny triumph. They were generally courteous. I didn't care that some people were irritated. By day's end, I had recovered about $30,000. Although I did lose some deposits along the line, it was worth it for me peace of mind, given how much the entire wedding was going to cost. Lisa was oddly silent while I dealt with all of this. After the dinner, she was aware that I was unhappy, but I don't believe she understood how serious I was. It was rare for her to not ask me where I was going or what I was doing. She used to be quite interested in my affairs, but now she is completely silent. She probably thought that in a day or two, I would calm down and everything would return to normal. I was halfway through ruining Erica's ideal wedding when Lisa finally came up to me. She discovered me seated at the kitchen table, surrounded by a pile of bank statements, contracts, receipts, and other documents. Why all this? Her voice was stern as she inquired. Without looking up, I said, "I'm calling off the wedding." Her mouth almost fell to the ground. "What are you?" "I heard you," I murmured, looking her in the eyes at last. "If I am treated like an outsider at a wedding, I will not pay for it. Let Greg take charge for once if he wants to be the big man." She looked at me, unable to speak. I thought she may burst into tears. but her expression hardened. "This cannot be done simply. Erica depends on you. Is she? It seems like she's banking on Greg from where I'm sitting," so I shot back. Lisa began to fight, using every possible reason. She said, "You're overreacting. Erica's happiness, not yours, is at stake here. You're being self-centered." Selfish. I felt like I was slapped in the face by that term. I had given them all they wanted without expecting anything in return, prioritizing their needs over my own for many years. And I was the self-centered one when I at last defended myself. I got up and loomed over her. "Selfish. Allow me to define selfishness for you. While I foot the bill, selfishness is removing me from Erica's life. Allowing Greg to claim credit for something he didn't do is selfish. Perhaps you should look in the mirror if you believe that I am self-centered." Lisa slammed the door behind her as she ran out of the room. She was pacing upstairs, and I could hear her contacting Erica to complain about my irrationality. Let them gripe. I was no longer concerned. I got up early in the morning. I made a cup of coffee for myself and resumed my job. I canceled the string quartet's reservation over the phone. I received the most of my money returned, and they were courteous, despite their disappointment. I instructed the business creating the personalized wedding invitations to halt production in an email. They gave a complete refund because they hadn't printed anything yet. The wedding was practically deconstructed by the time I finished. There would be no cake, no music, no caterer, no venue, and no Mercedes parked in Erica's driveway. The wedding seemed to have never happened, and to be honest, I felt as though a burden had been removed. After that, Lisa spoke very little. She avoided me much of the time by staying in the guest room. Erica began bombarding my phone with texts, claiming that I had ruined her life. None of them got a response from me. I had had enough of being their doormat, and I had no intention of apologizing for regaining my independence. I shut down my laptop and reclined in my chair once the final vendor confirmed the cancellation, experiencing a sensation I hadn't enjoyed in years. Calm. I wasn't being tugged in 100 different directions for the first time in a long time. Making everyone happy at the expense of myself was not my goal. At last, I was free. You would think that once I called off the wedding, they would realize that I was finished. However, no. The pleading started as soon as the dust settled. Erica was the first to do so, followed by Lisa, and then Greg also chose to enter the fray. Let me tell you, it was both gratifying and pitiful to see them scramble. A few days after I cut the connection, it began with Erica. She sent me an SMS. No regret, no recognition of the way things had turned out. And now for the guilt trip. Why you're punishing me is beyond me. All I wanted was for my father to attend my wedding. Are you unable to feel joy for me? I gazed at my phone, attempting to determine whether it was worthwhile to respond. Are you punishing her? Really? Her whole way of life had been funded by me. I was punishing her now. Yes. No. I didn't even try to respond. I didn't want to engage in a back and forth in which, regardless of what I said, I would always be portrayed as the villain. She made another attempt a few hours later. Could we please discuss this? Everything is very hard for me because of you. I'm supposed to be at my happiest right now. Stressful. Oh, she was under stress once more. If she wanted to chat, I ignored her. She may begin by admitting her part in this whole situation. Naturally, though, that never took place. Lisa made the decision to weigh in the next day. I was preparing coffee in the kitchen when she cornered me. Her face fixed in that familiar expression, her arms folded. You're wrong, and I'm right. She has honed her expression throughout the years. We must speak, she said. I let out a sigh. What is it about? What do you know? She lost her temper. Erica's wedding is being ruined by you. Are you aware of her level of distress? Since you canceled everything, she hasn't stopped weeping. Excellent. Flatly, I replied. Perhaps at last she will recognize everything that I have done for her. Lisa gave me the impression that I had suddenly grown a second head. You're not serious. You are behaving like a kid. You are not the focus of this. It has to do with Erica. Nevertheless. Leaning on the counter, I spoke. I was the one who made the payment. So, yes, I am the one that triggered her. She went on a lengthy tirade about how I was destroying the family, being self-centered, and allowing my pride to spoil what should have been a joyous event. Mostly because I wanted to see how far she would push it, I let her continue for a while. However, the crocodile tears did really come as she began to cry. I interrupted her. "Let me ask you a question, Lisa," I said, maintaining a composed tone. Where had this energy gone? Erica started to reply when she made the decision to exclude me from the wedding. However, I raised a hand. "No, don't respond, as we are both aware of the reality. Then, you didn't give a damn. And now you don't give a damn. You only want me to cover the wedding expenses, so that you may continue to act like you and Erica. Greg is a fantastic father." She remained silent. She simply gazed at me, a mixture of wrath and what appeared to be shame on her face. Nearly. "I'm finished," I remarked as I returned my attention to my coffee. "Do you wish to have a wedding? As a family, figure it out for yourself." Lisa slammed the door behind her as she ran out of the kitchen. I thought it would finish there, but I didn't realize how desperate they were. Greg called a day later. Indeed, Greg made the decision to comment. I nearly didn't answer when his name appeared on my phone, but I did out of curiosity and said, "Hello?" With an excessively nonchalant tone, as if we were old friends, he added, "Hey man. Listen, I just wanted to chat after hearing about what transpired." "What is it about?" Already irritated, I asked. "Well," he began, "about the wedding. I get that you're unhappy, but don't you feel like you're going overboard?" In fact, I laughed. "Are you overreacting? You've only been a father in name for 20 years, Greg, and now you're telling me how I ought to feel." Ignoring it, he continued, "This isn't about us, and I realize that I haven't been as involved as I might have been. It has to do with Erica. She is inconsolable. Man, for her sake, can't you simply let it go? Give it up." What a brat this man is. He had the audacity to advise me to forget about the years I had spent cleaning up his mess. "I want to clarify something, Greg." My voice was steady as I spoke. "Dad, you wanted to play? Fantastic. For once, take charge and be a father. Otherwise, there's no use in giving me another call." For a brief minute, I believed he may actually step up during the lengthy delay on the other end, but obviously not. Rather, he hung up after muttering something about trying my hardest. Normal. A few days later, Erica arrived to the home, marking the end of this circus. She seemed worn out, as if she hadn't slept for days, but I wasn't going to give in to my guilt. She replied, her voice shaking, "I just don't understand why you're doing this. You have always supported me. For what reason are you suddenly ignoring me?" I glanced at her while crossing my arms. "I have a question for you, Erica. When you made the decision to exclude me from your wedding, there was no father-daughter dance, no reference in the invitations, nothing. Have you ever considered how I would feel about that?" She didn't respond. She just fidgeted with her handbag strap while glancing down at her hands. "I've done everything in my power to be a father to you," I went on. "Making ensuring you have the finest life possible has been my goal, and yet you choose Greg when it counted. It's all right. You have a choice, but don't count on me to accomplish anything." She began to cry, but I remained still. I had offered her several chances to correct the situation, but she had decided to disregard them. She had made the bed here. She had to lie in it immediately. I experienced a strange range of feelings when she went. A part of me felt depressed. Seeing someone you care about leave your life is difficult. Mostly, though, I was relieved. The ultimate blow was delivered shortly after the begging trip. After Erica's tantrum at the home, I hoped they would finally get the point. However, they weren't finished yet. The ensuing quiet was more akin to the quiet before a storm, if anything. Greg, Erica, and Lisa didn't communicate for a week. To be honest, I assumed it was finished. I began to adapt to my new normal, working, unwinding, and relishing the tranquility that resulted from avoiding their daily turmoil. Naturally, though, that was not going to endure. My phone buzzed one Thursday afternoon while I was at work reviewing some paperwork. Something prompted me to take a quick look at the screen, even though I nearly disregarded it. Contrary to my better judgment, the number appeared somewhat familiar, even though it wasn't saved in my contacts. I said hi. Hello, this is Greg. It was Greg, of course. I reclined in my seat, already preparing myself for whatever absurdity he could be about to unleash on me. Greg, what do you want? Look, man, he began in an unduly informal tone. We have an issue, and I hate to be the one to bring it up, but I know that things have been difficult recently. I raised an eyebrow in response. What is this? Wheat, you mean? I could just hear the wheels moving in his brain during the delay on the other end. Finally, he added, Look, I understand. The problem is that I cannot afford it. You are what Erica and Lisa are banking on. I stated simply that it was not my concern. He began to dispute, but before he could say anything more, I ended the call. I honestly had wasted enough of my life cleaning up after him, and I had no time for his crap. Lisa made the decision to make a last-ditch effort that evening. She came in with a letter while I was in the living room, changing the channels. She appeared to be straining to keep her face together. What is that? Without even glancing up, I asked. It's from Erica, she muttered. I was requested to deliver it to you by her. I took a quick look at the envelope, but did not pick it up. Now what does she want? Lisa sat down on the couch across from me and apologized. She wants to make amends since she knows she wounded you. I arched an eyebrow. Does she? Because the last time I looked, she wanted to make up by asking me to cover the cost of a wedding. I've been excluded. Lisa let out a sigh and lowered her shoulders. Would you kindly just read it? I took the mail and opened it reluctantly. I was astonished to see that the letter was handwritten. I assumed Erica would simply contact me once more, but I suppose she felt that this would be more intimate. It was a lengthy letter. To be honest, it's too lengthy and filled with the same old justifications. If I gave you the impression that you weren't a member of the family, I apologize. I didn't intend to leave you out. All I wanted to do was respect my father. For me, this wedding is everything, and without your assistance, I can't accomplish it. I had heard this bullshit 100 times before, only using more elegant terminology. She didn't actually own up to her treatment of me in that letter. She made no mention of the fact that I had been her backer for all these years, while Greg coasted. I was being guilted into succumbing once more. I put the letter down after reading it and turned to face Lisa. She has a lot to learn if this is how she feels about apologizing. She's making an effort, Lisa remarked feebly. All she wants is the return of her wedding. She can, of course, continue to desire, I said, getting to my feet. And you're wasting your time if you believe I'll alter my mind. Lisa remained silent. She only sat there and gazed at the ground. I nearly felt sorry for her for a second, but then I recalled all the times Mom had let Greg to trample me. She consistently prioritized Erica's needs and his feelings over mine. Any sympathy I could have had vanished. I found out the next day that the wedding had been formally called off. In the hopes that Brian's family would help with the expenses, Erica reportedly attempted to downsize, but they weren't amenable. I was informed that the entire situation escalated into a heated argument, and Brian's parents completely withdrew their support. A week later, Lisa left, taking what little she could take because of the prenuptial agreement. I could proceed with the divorce without her demanding payment. I started to reconstruct my life after changing the locks and deleting the joint accounts. I blocked them everywhere. Nothing that connects me to this bullshit is what I desire. Family. Give their drama to Greg. I was finished, and that felt fantastic, I must say.